I was in college when this happened. I still think about it sometimes, usually when I'm walking alone. I was 21 back then. My best friend Jess and I had decided to hike through the Appalachian Trail that summer, just two college girls with second-hand gear, a worn-out trail guide. We started in Georgia, all excitement and navette, our backpacks packed too heavy and our knees sore by day 3. But there was this joy to it, being dirty, tired, and wild. We'd laugh ourselves to sleep under thin nylon walls and wake to birdsong and chill mist clinging to the trees. Somewhere in Tennessee, about 3 weeks into the hike, we ran low on supplies. Our guidebook mentioned a small town a few miles off trail, nothing big, just a diner, gas station, and a general store. We figured we'd hitch into town, grab some food that wasn't freeze-dried, and restock on essentials. We left the trail that morning. It was hot, and the road stretched on, and cars were rare. When we heard the crunch of tires behind us, we turned, hopeful. It was a police cruiser. The windows were down, and 2 officers were inside, both white men, probably in their late 30s or early 40s. The driver wore aviator sunglasses, and the other one had a permanent smirk stitched into his face like he was enjoying some joke we didn't know. "You headed into town?" the driver asked. We exchanged a look. Jess gave a hesitant nod. "Yeah, just to resupply. A couple miles up, right?" The man in the passenger seat leaned out the window. "Hop in. We'll give you a ride. No sense walking in this heat." I hesitated, but the sun was brutal and our water was low. My legs ached and town still felt far. I looked at Jess. She shrugged, uncertain. And I, against that quiet scream inside me, said, "Sure, thanks." We tossed our packs in the trunk and slid into the back seat. As the doors clicked shut, I noticed the locks flick down. That was the first thing. The driver didn't head straight into town. Instead, he turned off onto a side road, one that snaked through the woods and dipped into hollows that cell service couldn't reach. At first, we figured maybe it was a shortcut. But then they started talking. "You girls hiking the trail alone?" the passenger asked, twisting around to look at us. "Yeah," Jess answered. "Just the 2 of us." "That's brave," the driver said. "You know how many weirdos hang around those woods?" I forced a laugh. "We've been fine so far." "Oh, sure," the passenger said. "But out here, well, let's just say you don't always see what's coming. Lot of places someone could disappear, and nobody would ever know." He said it like a joke, but his eyes didn't smile. Jess and I went quiet. I could feel her tensing beside me, hands balled into fists on her lap. My own heart began to thud louder than the engine noise. The driver started asking questions: where we were from, if we had boyfriends, how long we planned to be in town. His voice was casual, but there was this undertone, like he was trying to gauge something. The passenger leaned closer every time he spoke, eyes flicking over our legs. "You ever skinny dip out there in the woods?" he asked at one point, grinning. I said nothing. Jess gave a strained smile. "No." The driver laughed. "Shame. It's real private out here. No one'd ever know." The doors locked again. Click. Then unlocked. Click. The passenger played with the switch, glancing back to see our reactions. My mouth went dry. "You girls ever think about how easy it'd be for someone to take you? I mean, you're way off the trail. Could be anyone. Could even be us." That was it. The joke had peeled back, and what was underneath wasn't funny at all. "Actually," I said, voice trembling, "we're meeting someone in town. He's waiting for us at the gas station near the diner." The driver glanced at the passenger. They didn't say anything for a beat. Jess jumped in. "Yeah, he's already there. We texted him before we left the trail. I prayed they'd believe us. Or at least, not want witnesses." The cruiser slowed. We pulled into a faded parking lot beside a dusty gas station. The building looked half abandoned, but I saw a single clerk behind the counter watching us through the window. The driver stopped the car. "Guess this is your stop," he said. The locks clicked up. Jess and I didn't wait. We yanked open the doors, grabbed our packs, and ran inside the gas station. The clerk was a teenager, maybe 18, and clearly startled by our entrance. Jess whispered to him quickly, urgently, that we needed to stay inside. He nodded and let us linger by the counter, pretending to browse candy while we watched the cruiser idle outside for a full 5 minutes before it finally drove off. When they were gone, Jess broke down. I held her, hands shaking, heart pounding like it still hadn't caught up to the fact we were safe. We called a trail angel from a list we'd seen posted back on the trail and got a ride from a kind older woman named Martha who didn't ask too many questions. We reported it later, gave descriptions, explained everything, but the county said no such officers were on patrol in that area at the time. They checked, they said. Couldn't find anyone matching our story. We never got names. No badge numbers. Just two men with too much power in a place too isolated. I never saw them again. After that day, I stopped thinking of the trail as sacred. I still love the wild places, the open woods and starlit campsites. But I don't trust people the same way anymore. For all the warnings we got about bears, storms, hypothermia, no one ever said the thing you should fear most might pull up beside you in a marked car, smiling like he already knows your name. Jess and I finished the trail, eventually, but we stuck to our feet, never took another ride. I don't talk about this often, almost never, in fact. But every so often, something will bring it back. It was the year 2005. We had spent the better part of the year living out of our van, bouncing between national parks, trail systems, and any scrap of wilderness that felt wild and untamed. It was our way of breaking from the modern world. No phones, no rent, just us, the road, and the long green miles of America's backwoods. That June, we decided to tackle a less traveled portion of the Appalachian Trail, just outside the Mount Rogers National Recreation Area in Virginia. We had read about it in a dusty old trail guide, dense forests, rock outcroppings, hidden creeks, and plenty of space to lose the world for a while. Our plan was simple. 6 days of hiking, starting on the main trail and then cutting off into the deeper woods for a more secluded loop. We wanted real isolation, and we found it. The first few days passed in a kind of dream. The canopy above was thick and green, filtering the sun into pale gold. The trail was soft with pine needles. We saw almost no one, maybe a couple of thru-hikers passing by, nodding with tired smiles. But mostly, it was just us and the hush of the forest. It was on the first day, just before dusk, that we saw the tent. We had left the trail, following a deer path down toward a narrow creek that looked like a good place to set up for the night. The land sloped gently, and the forest thickened. I remember pausing to listen. Something felt off. Just silence and the crunch of our boots on dry leaves. That's when I saw it tucked behind a cluster of mountain laurel, almost completely hidden beneath camo netting. A green tent. Army green. Low profile. Too clean to be abandoned. Too concealed to be casual. "Hello?" I called out. But no response. Mark cupped his hands around his mouth and tried again. "Hey there." "Just passing through." Still nothing. The tent remained still and quiet, like it was holding its breath. I felt uneasy, but Mark shrugged. "Maybe someone's out hiking. Left their tent behind." "Then why hide it like that?" I asked. He didn't have an answer. We gave the tent a wide berth and hiked another 10 minutes before making camp. By the next morning, I told myself I'd overreacted. Backcountry campers stash tents all the time. Maybe they didn't want animals getting curious. We moved on, deeper into the loop, and for a while, the forest welcomed us again. But something hung over the trip after that. I don't know how to describe it, just a kind of weight. Like we were being watched. At one point, 3 days in, we found deer tracks following our own. They ran parallel to us for nearly a mile, then vanished. On the 5th day, we circled back toward where we started. The plan was to spend one more night in the woods before heading out the next morning. As we approached the familiar slope that led down to the creek, my stomach turned. I hadn't forgotten about the tent, but I hadn't expected to see it again. It was still there. But this time something had changed. The camo netting had been pulled aside. The front flap was unzipped, drooping open like a yawning mouth. I stopped in my tracks. Mark, we should just keep moving. But he was already walking toward it. Mark, don't, I started, but he waved me off. He crouched at the tent's entrance and peered inside. I saw his face shift, first confusion, then disbelief, and finally something close to horror. He stood up, too fast, stumbling back. I couldn't help myself. I stepped forward and looked inside. I wish I hadn't. There was a deer inside. Or what was left of one. Its body had been arranged. There's no better word for it. Not just placed, not butchered. Arranged. Its limbs were splayed unnaturally wide, tied down with cord. Its chest had been opened up, ribs broken outward like wings. The insides were mostly gone, but that wasn't the worst of it. Between its hind legs, something had been inserted. A long branch, stripped of bark, slick with some oily substance. Nearby, on the floor of the tent, was an empty bottle of baby oil, and a white towel, soaked dark with something that looked like blood or worse. The smell hit me last. Sweet, cloying rot with an undertone of something chemical. I gagged and turned away, bile rising in my throat. Mark grabbed my arm. We're leaving. Now. We didn't even speak. We just ran. I've never moved so fast with a full pack on my back. I kept imagining someone watching from the trees, just out of sight. Someone who had been waiting for us to come back. We hiked until well after dark, using our headlamps to stay on the trail. We didn't stop until we reached the car the next morning, filthy, exhausted, and trembling with fear. At the nearest ranger station, we reported what we saw. The ranger listened, took notes, and nodded slowly. He thanked us and said they'd check it out. We never heard back. I didn't sleep for days after that. Even now, I dream about it sometimes. The tent. The deer. It haunts me, the thought that someone is still out there. We haven't been back to that part of the Appalachian Trail since. I don't think we ever will. Whatever peace I found in the wilderness died out there in that clearing, swallowed by something twisted and cruel and human. People always talk about how nature is healing, and sometimes it is. But nature also hides things, terrible things. I'll never forget the night my grandfather told me the story. We were sitting by the fire in his old cabin. He looked at me with those deep, tired eyes and said, "Son, I want to tell you about the darkest thing I ever saw in my life." It happened back in 1976, when I was hiking the Appalachian Trail. I leaned in closer, my heart already pounding. Grandpa wasn't the kind to tell stories often, and when he did, you knew there was something serious. He cleared his throat and began. I was a young man then, about your age now, full of wanderlust and eager to see the world. The Appalachian Trail was calling me thousands of miles of wilderness, stretching from Georgia all the way up to Maine. It was supposed to be a test of endurance, a chance to be alone with the mountains, the trees, and the silence. But I didn't know then that some silences were best left unbroken. One hot July afternoon, I was hiking through a stretch of the trail that was especially remote. The trees grew thick and tall, their branches knitting together to block out the sun. The air was cool, I was following a narrow path when I noticed something odd, a thin trail leading off into a thicket of brush that didn't look like it belonged on the trail map. I pushed through the branches and found myself standing before the mouth of a cave, partly hidden behind tangled vines and moss-covered rocks. I'd never seen it marked anywhere. The entrance was dark and narrow, like it was swallowing the daylight. I hesitated, but something told me to step inside. The cave was damp and smelled of earth and decay. That's when I saw it piled against the wall. Enormous bones, some cracked and broken, others surprisingly well preserved. They were unlike anything I'd ever seen. Human bones, sure, but huge, like the remains of giants. My heart was pounding. I fumbled for my camera and snapped a few pictures, wanting proof of what I'd found. But as soon as I clicked the shutter, I felt a chill run down my spine. Like the cave had suddenly become alive, watching me. That night, I camped near the cave. I was tired, but couldn't sleep. My mind replayed the image of those giant bones over and over. When I finally drifted off, I was plunged into nightmares darker than any I'd ever had. I saw shadowy figures stalking me through the woods, their faces obscured, but their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. I ran, but no matter how fast I moved, they stayed close, relentless. I woke in a cold sweat, heart racing, the dawn barely breaking through the trees. I should have left then, but something a mix of fear and stubbornness made me go back to that cave. I wanted to understand what I'd seen. Was I imagining it? Had my mind played tricks on me? But when I got there again, the bones were gone. Just empty rock walls stared back at me. No bones, no signs of the giant remains. And the worst is, my camera was missing the one I'd used to take the pictures. And my backpack, which I'd left on a nearby rock, had been disturbed, some of my things missing. I looked around, calling out, but no one answered. The forest was silent again. I never found those bones again. Or my camera. For years, I kept the memory locked away, afraid to tell anyone. But son, I'm telling you now, because sometimes the mountains hold secrets older than we can imagine. And when you stumble on them, well, you change. You carry a weight you can't shake. I still wonder if those nightmares were warnings. Or maybe the ghosts of something buried long ago, restless because I disturbed their sleep. Whatever it wasn't meant for me to find. So when you're out there, hiking those trails, remember, not all mysteries want to be uncovered. I sat there, speechless. My grandfather's voice was low and serious. Did you ever tell anyone else? I finally asked. No, he said, shaking his head. Who'd believe a story like that? But it's real. And that's why I never went back to those woods again. It's been 8 years since that day, 8 years since the Appalachian Mountains, which I once loved, became a place I fear. I still remember clearly every detail and the cold grip of fear that took hold of my heart. I don't share this story often, but I think it's important to tell it now, in case someone else is hiking those trails and thinks they might be safe. My name is Amanda, and when this happened, I was just 12 years old. My family and I were hiking a remote stretch of the Appalachian Trail. We'd been on the trail for several days, enjoying the crisp mountain air and the silence that only nature can bring. At least I thought it was silence until the storm hit. The sky darkened in the afternoon, and soon the first drops of rain began to fall. At first, it was just a sprinkle, but within minutes the heavens opened, turning the dirt path into a muddy river. We had to find shelter fast. Luckily, about half a mile off the trail, my dad spotted a small cabin among the pines, worn by time but sturdy enough to protect us from the storm. We hurried inside, grateful for the roof and walls around us. The cabin was empty, but it had a fireplace, a creaky table, and a few old chairs. My parents tried to make it feel like a home for the night, while the storm raged outside. That night, As the wind howled through the trees and the rain battered the windows, a knock came at the door. My mother, always compassionate, opened it to reveal a man soaked to the bone. He introduced himself as Luke and asked if he could wait out the storm with us. His voice was soft, almost tired, and my parents, moved by the kindness we'd often been taught to show to strangers, agreed. Luke seemed harmless enough. He sat by the fire, drying his clothes, and shared stories about hiking the Appalachians. But as the hours passed, his demeanor shifted. He began asking strange questions, where the children were allowed to roam when we usually set up camp, if anyone had ever gotten hurt or lost on the trail. Luke insisted on watching over us that night, especially the younger kids. He offered to sit by the door while the rest of us tried to sleep. I lay awake, the rain pounding against the roof, and the uneven breathing of the man who claimed to be our protector. When morning came, the storm had passed, but Luke stayed. My family was polite, but cautious. We hoped he would leave soon, but the time went by, and every time we thought he was gone, he returned, uninvited. The unease in my chest grew heavier, turning into something close to terror. One afternoon, while my parents were gathering firewood, Luke cornered me near the edge of the clearing. His voice was almost a whisper, as he asked me where the children usually played, if I was allowed to explore the woods alone, and if anyone knew about our plans to leave the area. I remember backing away, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. That was the moment I realized we weren't dealing with just a lost hiker. There was something much darker about Luke, something dangerous. The smile he gave me didn't reach his eyes. It was twisted, a mask hiding whatever terrible thoughts lurked beneath. Fear swallowed my family whole. We stopped talking, stopped eating properly, stopped making plans. We just waited for someone to find us, or for the nightmare to end. Luckily, help came sooner than we expected. A local ranger patrolling the trail spotted Luke wandering near the cabin and, concerned by his behavior, alerted the authorities. When the police arrived, they found Luke and took him away in handcuffs. It was only afterward that the full horror came to light. Years later, I read about a man named Luke Grayson, a wanted criminal wanted for multiple child abductions and murders across several states. It was the same man who'd haunted my family in those woods. My parents never told me the full details at the time, trying to shield me from the nightmare I had almost become part of. I share this story not to scare you, but to remind you that danger can hide in the most beautiful places. The Appalachian Trail may seem endless and inviting, but sometimes you have to trust your instincts even if it means turning away from someone who asks for help.